Welcome to a brand new episode from Keyboard Hitter. This is Keyboard Hitter AngularJS series. In the previous video we have talked about Angular modules and controllers. We have seen how to create a module, how to create a controller, how we can register a controller within a module, and how to use controller components within Angular View. For some reason, if you haven't seen the video link given there in the description below. This is AngularJS episode 6, where we are going to talk about in details about AngularJS controller, like how to use a controller, when to use a controller, how to effectively use Angular controller within our AngularJS application, and how it can help us in separation of concern. Your support is all I need, so please hit the like button below. And please subscribe Keyboard Hitter for more upcoming AngularJS tutorials. So let's not waste time. Let's move on. So in the previous video we have created an Angular module called Demo Angular App. We have created a controller called Demo Controller. We added a property as test message within the scope object of this controller with a string as hello world. We have also seen how to access those controller and app from the Angular view. So here our view is index.html. So by the help of ngController directive we are accessing the controller, and with the help of ngapp directive we are accessing the Angular module that we have created. And as because we have added this ngController within the body element, so throughout the body element controller element will be available. So that is why we can use this test message within this span which is there inside of the body element, and we can display the test message string to into the browser. So now, as we have already seen, this controller is nothing but a JavaScript function. So the primary role of controller is to expose a data model and pass it to the view so that view can show it to the browser. Controller is not responsible to directly manipulate DOM. That is not controller job to do. Controller is here only to produce the data model and pass it to the view with the help of scope, so that view can manipulate it and view can display the required result to the browser. So it's not like we can define only single properties within the scope. We can also create a complex object within the scope. So we will see how to do that. For example, this is my controller, demo controller. Now I am trying to pass a complex object from this demo controller to the view so that view can display to the browser. So we can do this by $scope. Then I want to initialize, or I want to define a employee object, which will be nothing but a JavaScript object with two properties. First, name as test, and second, name as user. Now here within scope I have one single property called test message, and I have one complex object which is employee type object where I have first name and second name. Now within the index.html, the moment I will use this ngController directive within the body element, so I'll have access to all the components of ngController which are there inside the scope object. Okay, so likewise this test message I can also use the employee complex object that I have declared within the controller scope. So here I can write ul, close ul, then li, first name, close li, open li, close li. Here I can say, with the help of binding expression, I'll do employee dot first name. Then I'll copy this line and I'll paste it, and I'll do second name here, and then here employee dot second name. So likewise this test message employee property is also there inside the scope object. Here employee is nothing but a JavaScript object, and within that object we have first name and second name, two property. So what I'm doing here, I have the hard-coded string as text to show on the page, and then within this binding expression I'll try to parse this first name value and second name value, and I'll show them in the browser. So what will be the flow? The moment I'll execute this code, run this code, what AngularJS will do? AngularJS will see this ng controller is being defined within the body element. So throughout this body element, it will have access to the controller properties which are there inside the scope object. So now inside the scope I have this test message, so it will parse this test message, as because this test message text is there inside the binding expression. So it will try to parse this binding expression, and it will see this test message is there inside the scope object, so it will fetch the value from the controller and it will show. Similarly here also it will find two binding expressions, so it will go to the scope object of the controller and will see is there any employee object. So when it will find the employee object, so it will try to find the properties are first name and second name, and once it find the property value, so it will parse this expression into the real value. Okay, so now as we have already seen that Grunt has one function called waiting, which is always running in the background. So whenever we make some changes in the file, it will automatically reflect the changes into the browser page. So if we go back to the browser, we can see first name, then the value is test, second name, then the value is user, and this test and user we have assigned here within the employee object within the first name and second name property. Okay, now if we go back to the ng controller, and if we remove this ng controller directive and its value, and then if we go back to the browser, so we won't get to see any result. Okay, so basically here, as because we have removed this ng controller directive, so when Angular will try to parse this expression, binding expression, so it will not find these properties within the object, okay, within the scope. Now what if I removed this ng app as well? Now here we'll get to see some difference, and we'll try to understand how it is happening. Now if we go back to the browser, so we can see that AngularJS couldn't find the value of first name, last name, first name, second name, and test message. That is fine, but now it is displaying the raw text that we have written in the HTML page. So why previously these values were empty? Okay, so again if we go back and if we add this ng app, and if we come back to the browser, so we'll get to see, okay, that is fine, that AngularJS couldn't find value of first name, second name, and test message, but it is not showing those raw text that we have inside the curly braces. Now we'll talk about it, that why this is happening. Because the moment we are attaching this ng app, we are giving the AngularJS framework the access to take care of this body element, entire body element. So AngularJS, whenever it will see these curly braces, so it will get to understand, okay, these are the binding expressions. So whatever piece of code is there inside these curly braces, Angular will try to parse this property from the scope. Okay, if these properties are available within the scope, now it will show the result, and if that is not there within the scope, so it will not display anything. But the moment if we remove this ng app, Angular framework is no more there. Okay, so this curly braces and this binding expression are nothing but raw HTML text for the browser. Okay, so browser will directly print this raw text into the browser page. Angular will no longer be there to take care of this binding expression. So this is why when we are adding ng app, we are not get to see this curly braces and the raw text, and whenever we are adding this ng app, we are not seeing those raw text or these curly braces, and it's inside text. So this is how AngularJS is performing, and it's taking care of binding expression. So now it's not like we can add only properties within the scope. We can also define some function as well, and we can use those functions from the view. So here within the scope object we can define a function called test function. Okay, it will be a JavaScript function, and here we can write a piece of code to display an alert with the text as hello from controller. So now we have a function within our scope object, and we can invoke this function from the index.html page directly, like we have used this property controller property like test message, employee.first name, employee.second name. Similarly, we can call the function as well. So within the curly braces or within the binding expression, we can directly call this function. So whenever this body element will get loaded into the browser, this function will automatically gets called. Okay, so if you go back to the browser, we can see a hello from controller text within an alert window. Okay, now we'll go back to the controller and we'll remove this piece of code. Now we want a user to take some or to perform some action and then only to call this function. So for that we can add one button. Okay, and on click of this button we can call the function instead of calling the function directly within the body element. So we'll do that. So ng-click equal to test function. Now here we'll write test button as the button text, and then we'll close the button. So here what we did, we removed the direct calling of the function and we added this test function call within a button click event. Now do not get confused with this ng-click. This is nothing but a separate directive of AngularJS framework that we can use to define the click function of an element. Okay, so in the later video we'll talk about this ng-click in details. So let's go back to the browser and see what the changes we have. Now if we refresh the page, now here we have one button called test button. Now if we click on this button, one sec, are we missing anything? Yeah, we need to call this. Refresh the page. Now if you click on this button, we'll get to see hello from controller text, which is coming from the controller from that test function that we have declared within the inside the controller scope object. So here in today's episode we have seen like how we can declare a complex object or complex jQuery object within the scope object inside Angular controller, and how we can use that complex object from the view. And we have also seen like apart from properties, we can also define some function within the controller scope object, and we can directly call this function from the view. And we can also add some event for the user to trigger, and then only we will call AngularJS Angular controller function. So that's it for now. If you like the video, so please leave a like below, and please subscribe my channel for more upcoming AngularJS tutorials. I'll come with a new AngularJS episode with more fundamental about AngularJS framework. So till then, bye bye. Thank you very much for watching this video. Stay tuned.